All right, well, it is 10:45, time to get started with our class. So for those who have been here, you know where we are in the book of Revelation. We also know we'll be taking a couple weeks of a pause from this, so we'll kind of come back and catch us back up as I'll be out the next couple of Sundays. But we'll continue on. We will eventually get through this book. Or Jerry, I'll turn it over to him to teach it. He has willingly and graciously been saying he will. As willing to do. Yeah. He would do a great job. We need to push him, and out of his comfort zone, have him teach this. All right, so we're up to Revelation chapter 8. Where we are in this, to kind of put into perspective, and it's incredibly important as if you miss a week here and there or whatever, that you don't lose sight of the timeline of where we're talking about, because it is so easy to let other teachings that have been wrapped into this mislead you into the timeline of it. All of this is the same conversation that is happening in the throne room where John, who was on the island of Patmos, has been brought up into the throne room. He's up in this throne room being shown this vision. All of it's been taking place. The majority of the time that has transpired right now is that 30 minutes of silence that we have at the beginning of chapter 8 that we'll see there. Aside from that, it's just been one event after another shown to him. And so the timeline hasn't jumped ahead in the future. Yeah, we're 6-7 chapters, or as far as the Revelation part of it goes, we're 3 to 4 chapters into it now. But we have not yet seen a jump into eternity or the end times. That has not happened yet. There are still all of these things, what we talked about at the beginning, still apply. He showed me these things that were soon going to happen, that were about to come to pass. All of these things were right before them. They were written to the people who were highly persecuted to tell them, can't say their name out loud, but all these people, you recognize all the symbols that we're going to give you, and you recognize all this references that we're making that only we get, all these inside conversations, kind of inside jokes, but not jokes, that kind of references that only we get. They keep using all of this symbolism that would be familiar to people who had been familiarized with God's word. And he's going to use those symbols to kind of sneak to them a message of encouragement to say, the Romans don't win. God wins. So that's where we are in this. All right, so last week when we got into Revelation chapter 8, I made a blunder and waited, or it was, chapter 6. I waited until we got to chapter 8 to realize I had inadvertently forgot to have Josh read. So I told him, I'm going to let him read the first verse this time so I don't get going on a path of my thought and slip others. So if you're ready, Josh, I've got Revelation 8:1 for you.
When he opened the third seal, there was silence in heaven for half an hour. Matt, back to you.
Okay, so an important thing happens right here. Remember, we have been going through all of the seals. What were the seals even of? They're on a scroll, right? The scroll, what was that? That was the one that everyone wanted to see, but everybody was weeping because no one was found worthy. There's one who's worthy to actually bring this message, and it was the Lamb, Jesus Christ. So you have one person who's able to actually open this up. Opens it up, and as he opens it up, there was messages after messages. The horsemen, again, messages of God's power that were going to be exerted out, one right after another. And then a very, very important on the fifth seal, all of a sudden you hear all the voices of the martyrs that are underneath the altar of God crying out, how long until all these things happen? You've said you've got all these powers that you're going to exert on them. How long do we have to wait around until our blood is avenged? And he said, just hang in there a little bit longer, a little bit longer. And then we get to the seventh seal. So the seventh seal's open. There's silence for half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. So as the 7th seal is opened, now there's 7 trumpets. Time has not changed. We're still in the announcing of what's happening here. So another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer, and with the prayers of all God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of God's people, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth, and there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Rick, if you don't mind, last week after class, Rick kind of gave me kind of your interpretation of like, how you picture this in your mind. And I could replicate it, but I won't do as good of a job. So I'll let you, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. So if you've been to any worship services and other traditions, you'll be familiar with the censer, right? So that's the thing that holds the incense and burns. And so here we have a picture of the incense and the prayers going up to God, but then this angel's taking this little metal box and just hurling it at the earth as a flaming ball. It's a pretty graphic image to me.
Yeah. And the representation there is that, this is a, it's from heaven. I mean, it's, we see where it's coming from and all this, and all of these things that you see there come out of it. The peals of thunder, the rumbling, the flashes of lightning, the earthquake, all of this as a result of that. Then the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. And so we see partial destruction out of this one from the first angel's trumpet. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned to blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. And then we get to the third angel. The third angel sounded his trumpet. A great star, like a blazing torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood, and a third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. And then we see the fourth one. We're going to group all these together in a second. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, and a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. All right. What we see here is where we get into this figurative speech, where he's giving us this indication of all of these different natural forces with partial destruction. This is not the end of the world. This is a partial destruction that God is going to exert, and he's going to use natural forces to do it. He is not telling us this is how the end of the world happens. As a matter of fact, things are going to continue on in this storyline, even beyond this. So this can't be a description of that, based on the fact that we still have more things yet to come. This is a third destruction, is what it's listed as. The land, the sea, the rivers, the sky, all facets of nature. I mean, what other nature could you come up with? You've got the sky and the expanse, including outer space. You've got the land, the actual dirt, the ground, and things that grow in it. You've got the sea, but also the waters that pour across the land. Everything is going to be impacted in the sense that he has control over all of it. And he's going to exhibit partial destruction on these. The idea were to encourage some of them to repent, because only some of them are going to be, hurt from this. These are all kind of this idea like stop, this is him exerting these powers on that. It says, as I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in the midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other 3 angels." In other words, you think those are bad? You can kind of picture this this eagle flying by like, it's about to get worse. Like that's basically what this eagle's doing. And it's this idea that God has this power. Now, we talked about before how he could use natural disasters, he could use economic disasters, he can use outside forces to exhibit war against them. And that was his message of encouragement to the souls under the altar, that that's how I'm going to take down your oppressors. That's how I'm going to take down the ones who did that to you. And that is still doing it to your brothers and sisters who are still on the earth. And so he says, the 5th angel sounded his trumpet. And I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss, and out of the smoke, locusts came on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. Again, the problem with this, when you read these, is that if you go into the all of a sudden, this is how the world ends kind of mentality, Jesus has not returned yet in this storyline. Again, just kind of go with me on this one. I don't think this is talking about the end times, but I just want to put it into what if. What if that way of thinking is correct? If that way of thinking were correct, Jesus has not yet come back. Yet a third, we have to be literal now, a third of all these things have been destroyed around us. There is a plume of locusts like scorpions that are just darkening the sky as they come out of this, this abyss. But yet Jesus hasn't come back yet. What does Jesus actually tell us his return is like? A thief in the night. That doesn't sound like a thief in the night description, does it? This would be so much in opposition to what Jesus himself told us the end would be like if this were talking about the end. So we have not jumped into time. This is still a reference to, in figurative speech, about what is happening in his answer back in chapter 6, verse 8, 9, and 10, with those souls under the altar, as he's making sure he answers to them, this is how I avenge your blood. He's going to use every force he has available to him. He will call out locusts from down in the abyss to do that. I mean, this is how he's saying he's going to hold nothing back from this attack against the people who are trying to destroy his church. All right. So then they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree. Okay, here's where you get into the what if this were literal? Why would there be grass on the earth? Remember? The other trumpet said it all burned up. Don't lose sight of the fact that we're still figurative. That's why it's okay that all the grass gets burned up on one, and the next one says don't harm the grass that's already been burned up. So, because we're not talking about actually burning up the grasses. This is talking about God using his forces there. And so do not harm the grass of the earth or the plant or trees, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Way back in chapter 7, if you turn back to there just briefly, at the very beginning, how many was that? 144,000. And we said before, that's everybody who God has on his side, not 144,000 as a literal number. This is everybody who God has, he knows them. He's put his seal on them. This is not some literal seal, just the way there's not going to be some later literal mark of the beast. These are figurative ideas to mark out who God knows, and he knows all of his people. He is not doing these things to his people. When they go out there, they are not to harm that. This is only people who aren't my people that are my target. That's what he's saying. This is just those who are against him. They were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And then the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. During those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. And they long to die, but death will elude them. I suspect he's talking about, if I were to read into what this could look like, he sounds like he's sending a plague of some kind, very much in the same style of the wording of what the 10 plagues would be. That would be a reference to them like, oh, locust, that's a plague. And it's going to go out there and it's only going to harm not my people? That sounds like what he did to Egypt. Do you kind of see the way he's using this figurative language to tell them, I will strike them down, and if it takes harming their health to get them, I will give them painful sores and everything else. It'll feel like scorpion bites. I will get rid of these people from you. They will not win. And again, that's kind of what we see here. That's why the woe is by that angel, or by the eagle, when it flew over was woe, because it's about to get worse. You think that watching the seas turn to blood and the water get bitter was bad. Wait until you have painful sores all over you that feel like scorpion bites, if that's what it takes. The locusts look like horses prepared for battle. I can't picture that. I don't know exactly what a swarm of locusts that can sting like a scorpion that looks like a horse preparing for battle might look like, but the idea there is this just this unstoppable force that is coming out. On their heads were something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces, and their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lion's teeth. Wow, this is getting weirder. I never saw a horse with a human face and woman's hair that flew like a locust. And do you see the figurative thing here? He can't even put into words what this is. He's trying to describe it, and he just can't. I think the nice part about this is you don't have a literal interpretation of this. Because if you did, what's the natural thing you're going to do? Make this literal. He stays figurative entirely through the description of it so that we cannot be tempted, hopefully, to take this literally in the sense of this is what's coming out. Look at the message behind what he's still saying. If this message was written to the early Christians, and the way that the Romans go down is going to include a lot of these facets of it, we can't go back and say, no, this applies to modern America. Let's slap it way out in the future and make it literal. By doing that, you take away everything that he did in getting this message sent out to them. Let's continue on. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron. The sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. God's forces are hard to describe, hard to put into picture, but he's got the forces behind him. And I don't know that I would ever want to see a human-faced, woman-haired, covered with armored, horse-flying, locust, sting bite like a scorpion swarm come at me. But I'm glad I'm not the target of it. And that's really what the message was. This is coming after someone else on that one. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, and in their tails they had the power to torment people for 5 months. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon, that is, destroyer. And so they've pulled out from the abyss. God's using the forces that he can use from the abyss, and he's pulling them out, the destroyer, to attack the world. The fifth trumpet is announced only to the evil that are going. It is not to the church. Yeah.
Why 5 months mentioned twice?
Well, because ultimately, on the timeline of this, the entire thing is going to happen for a time, times, and half a time. And all these things are going to happen within that, which is a total of 42 months. So these things are kind of that period of time that was referenced in Daniel. This is, in other words, only going to last for a portion of that. So again, we get into that literal versus figurative. The idea there is for one of those sevens, you got to go back to Daniel 10 on the 7 sevens in order to really understand where we're even going with these timelines, because then you get into it's so easy to jump into the literal 5 months. So what we're doing here is we're looking at one of the sevens. During half of one of those sevens, this all starts happening. And it's a 3.5 period of a 7, which was 1,280 days or 42 months or a time, times and half a time, which would add up to 3.5 times or sevens. Again, you get into this really hard thing to grasp because it's all figurative. So if we take that figurative and say, okay, 5 months is a literal 5 months, why did we all of a sudden go literal? So that's where I would kind of say it's a partial part of the period of time that God's going to utilize to take down the Romans. So for one section of that, a set apart time, they're going to be suffering this way. Does that kind of answer it? I think that's the best way I can describe it, and that may or may not be exactly right.
That is why I wouldn't begin to try to.
You would do fine, Jerry. Okay, but God, the ultimate message out of this is that God's still going to protect his people on that. That is a message that is not missed on this one at all. He will take down this empire through some of their own evil ways, because he is calling on the evil to be attacked by the destroyer. And so the own evil will turn against itself, and he's going to, from within their own evil ways, he's going to be able to take them down. That's what this fifth trumpet is really announcing, and it's going to be painful. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be unpleasant, and it may be like the stings of a scorpion, but it is going to come from within on this one. The own evil will turn on itself, and it does. By the way, spoiler: the Romans did turn on themselves. So the first woe was past; the other 2 woes are yet to come. The 6th angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the 4 horns of the golden altar that is before God. It said to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." And the 4 angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. Okay, so here's another thing. So if we have a half or a third of people killed and a third of this destroyed, and all of these partial terms, again, if we jump into literal, we start to get into the problem of, is it a third of the 2/3 remaining, or is it, you start to get into those kinds of issues. Or is this, maybe, the way this entire chapter has been written, still in this figurative sense of how God is going to do that? I think that makes just so much more sense. Why take this as literal and pull one of them out and say, okay, a third of the people die this way, which, by the way, just pause, always remember, has Christ come back yet in this storyline? No. You think a third of the people are going to drop dead on earth and we somehow would be surprised by Jesus coming right after that? That just, none of those things add up correctly. There's something not quite right about that timeline, because if that's literal, a third of the people are going to die off from these forces that are going to be ushered in by the four angels bound back by the river Euphrates. If a third of the mankind is going to be destroyed and killed this way, after all these torments that have gone on, I feel like we would have noticed that before Christ would come. And the thief in the night part of it probably wouldn't. And some people are like, maybe this is it, maybe this is it. These don't sound like maybes. These sound like definites if they were literal. I mean, again, I would have haunted dreams about that swarm of locusts with the human face. That is astonishingly disturbing of a description to me. Maybe not as much to you, but that one to me would haunt my dreams. I don't think I would be surprised by anything that would be coming after that in that sense. So again, if Jesus says, when I return, it'll be like a thief in the night, and no one will be, so be waiting and watching and an expectation for that, then to turn around and say, or you could look for massive clues given out. No, that doesn't match up, right? And so that's why, again, this isn't really talking about the end times yet. We're not to that point. So the number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes having heads with which they inflict injury. All right, so the sixth trumpet is now outside forces. So far what do we have? The first four trumpets were natural disasters of some different types, all the different natural forces that God could use to weaken the empire. The fifth one was their own evil, corrupts from within. The sixth one is outside forces that he's been holding back, and they've been waiting. Oh, they're waiting. Trust me, the rest of the world had been waiting to take down those Romans. And as soon as he let them in and gave them the opportunity, they're going to come fight from the outside, seizing this opportunity that was before them, that God weakened out of the Romans. He's going to let them kind of rush in. So he's going to use these others, like he used Nebuchadnezzar, to haul off his people and protect them and teach them, but not Egypt. He picks which ones are the right ones, and he is going to use outside forces here to inflict his judgment on the Roman Empire. That's what we see happening on this sixth one, and there's going to be a lot of death associated with it. Not total death. Romans won't be wiped out in that sense entirety. It was 1/3, partial. There will be some death out of this, and a lot of pain inflicted by this as well, by these forces that are way more powerful than they thought it was going to be, and they're going to come in and kind of take after them. So this is a quote I wanted to read you. Should have made it bigger font. So I'm going to have to walk halfway to the back of the room to read this to you. But no, this one, on that, I put Revelation 8. We are up to the Revelation 9. But it says, now we're at the warnings of the six trumpets before us, warnings against the persecutor from natural disasters, from its evil and corruption, from outside attacks. From history, we know that three primary causes for the eventual fall of the Roman Empire were natural disasters, internal corruption, and attacks from outside by the Huns, Goths, Vandals, and others. So God will begin these processes as a warning to see if Rome will stop its persecution. The Romans, however, the great persecutor of the early church, will not change. That was one of the things, and that Stafford North wrote about this. If you're familiar with him, he's a longtime member of the church who recently passed, was a kind of a pillar down in the Oklahoma Christian University community down there. But he really got this book. He understood it, and what a link there to make between those two is that these first six trumpets exactly announce how this empire goes down. Shouldn't surprise us. Back in Daniel, he told us how they were all going to fall apart. And so we see this happening. Remember, this is a period of time that while the legs were of iron The feet were partially iron and partially clay. They had some internal weaknesses to them that all you had to do is hit them in the right spot, and this thing goes down. And that's basically what we're seeing, is that Nebuchadnezzar's dream finally coming to fruition during the time that the church is also building up at the same time. And the one that survives will be the church, not the Roman Empire. And that was that message from back in Daniel chapter 2, becomes the message again through the book of Revelation as well. All right, so the rest of mankind who were not killed by those plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons, the idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood, idols that cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murders, their magic arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts. Everything that was going on wrong in the world around continued to go on. The Roman Empire just kept everything that should have steered them in there. You know, they talk about like these massive earthquakes and these natural disasters. Pompeii happened shortly after this time. Maybe that should have been a warning sign to them. Like all these things, none of these things seem to rattle them. That none of them were assigned to them that God was really, truly doing this. They just kept on their evil ways. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven. He was robed in a cloud with a rainbow above his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs were like fiery pillars. He was holding a little scroll, which lay open in his hand. And he planted his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. And he gave a loud shout like the roar of a lion. When he shouted, the voices of the seven thunders spoke. And when the seven thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven say, seal up what the seven thunders have said and do not write it down. I don't know what that was. I mean, if he's willing to tell us what the trumpets announced and what the seal said, what did the seven thunders say? Good question. We don't know, because it was sealed up and not to be repeated. But whatever it was, there was something else that John heard. And interestingly, what's John's reaction to all of this? Just kind of put the writing aside. Down the road, what is John's life like after this? Who knows the rest of that story there?
What about preaching? They had to carry him because his knees were shot from leaving all the time praying.
Yeah, and he was eventually released. He gets to go back. They tried everything to kill him. By the way, by the time, do you know why we didn't even mention this. Do you know why he's in exile in Patmos? Because the attempts to murder him execute him have already gone. They boiled him in oil. I mean, they did all sorts of terrible things to John, and they just could not kill him. So they threw him to the island of Patmos. And God gives them this encouragement and this message of, you got more to tell people. Not that one. Not the thunders. Don't tell them that one. I don't know what that would have done to it. But John wasn't shaken in his faith by it. So it's nothing that we're missing there that changed some secret understanding that John all of a sudden has a different gospel message. It wasn't anything like that, because we can see, because it doesn't change what he continued on. But then he finds a way, knowing what these people are capable of, because they tried to do it to him, that he was able to then get some of that message sent out to the churches for encouragement to them. And again, why does it have to be so difficult to understand it? Because if it was easy to understand it, the Romans would have understood it. And you've got to understand that part of it, or you miss the entire reason why it's written the way it is. If the Romans could ever crack the code of this book, the message of encouragement ended right there. This was written to encourage them. God would still exert his power, but the message of encouragement would have stopped.
I just was thinking, what would be the point of sending this letter to the first of the seven churches and having it circulated through the world if it was about the United States of America?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and honestly,
this doesn't even
it doesn't register and make sense, and that's why some people have tried to.
tell them about something in 2000, that can barely grasp the history of, what's going on before. What good does it do to tell them about it? But yet there are people that believe some of the most fantastical.
Right. And that's the thing. You could make an argument that why would we care about what happened 2,000 years ago, though? Well, we do care because that was God. We see God's work in establishing his church. I don't. And I don't get any encouragement out of knowing what God might do if I were under serious persecution right now. I get no relief and encouragement that things are going to make it through if I find out what he does 1,000 years, 2,000 years in the future to a different group of people. And so again, we do need to keep that in mind, that we have to keep kind of putting this back to what is going on, who's the recipient of this message. Don't lose sight of the fact that Jesus has not shown up on the scene yet, in the sense of he's still in throne room on heaven. By seeing, I mean on the earth. He has not come back. This isn't things that are happening. This isn't some massive amount of things that's going to happen right before Jesus shows up, because that would then negate what he told us his return would be like. And so we see all of these things, and it becomes a very difficult, let me say it this way. It's easier to interpret this if it's all future events and it's literal, because it's easy. You just read it for what it is, and these things are going to happen. That's the easy approach. The problem is it's just not correct, because it doesn't match up with what Jesus himself said about how his return will be. And when he comes back, as you look at what we read in 1 Thessalonians, he doesn't come back to earth. He comes back and gathers us home to bring us home. The second coming is a gathering home. He's done the work here. He did that. He established his kingdom. He did all this stuff. He's reigning on his throne. He told that already in this book to the church at Philadelphia and to the church at Laodicea, actually, where he says, I'll still let you come up and sit on my throne. Well, sounds like he's reigning. Sounds like he's got a kingdom. He does. And so there again, it's not talking about another kingdom yet to come. He's talking about in his kingdom. All right. So he says, not to write down what the thunders said. Then the angel I had seen standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created the heavens and all that is in them, the earth and all that is in it, and the sea and all that is in it, and said, there will be no more delay. And so where are we, by the way, on the timeline of this? We are between the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet still. So all this is kind of like a little side event that's taking place, that this scroll comes down with this angel who's proclaiming it and says, okay, there's no more delay. But in the days when the seventh angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, just as he announced to his servants the prophets. Then the voice I had heard from heaven spoke to me once more. Go, take the scroll that lies open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land. Okay, so I go take it out of his hand. John's got some interesting event taking place here. That he's going to go over and take the scroll out of this angel who just came down from earth, standing there on the sea and the land, hand raised to heaven and saying, there's no more delay. You know, it's about to happen. And in the days when that seventh angel, because it's like all the sixth ones where all the natural forces are going to take down Rome. The evil corruption from inside is going to take down Rome. Outside forces are going to take down Rome. And then all of these now, these seven thunders, which we can't even hear about, then now you've got this angel out there who's saying, time's up, there's no more delay. And when this happens, all of this that was announced to the prophets is going to make more clear that mystery of God will be accomplished. And so what is meant by in the day when the seventh angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, just as he announced to the servants, his prophets. What's meant by that? Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
I think he's talking about the church.
Similar to it, yeah. The church has always been the answer to the mystery of God, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And so if he's talking about the answer to the mystery of God, which was always told to the prophets, what did he always tell the prophets? Hold firm to God. The Messiah is coming. Think about what he told Isaiah. Think about all these things that he talked about, all of these events that were going to take place that would be fulfilled in Christ. 300 prophecies in the Old Testament about Jesus, all fulfilled in him. All of these things in the days when the seventh angel is about to sound his trumpet, the church is being established. So in other words, all of this is taking place that Jesus is doing in the days leading up to this. All these things are about to happen. It's this time period that's being talked to. So again, don't forget the timing on this. Because if you lose sight of that, you just blast right past that verse, you miss the whole thing about all of what the prophets were talking about. The prophets weren't ever really focused on the end times. There are not many prophecies at all about the end times. That has never been prophesied about from the Old Testament much. It was always about the end of this empire. You're going to be sent into this, that Jerusalem's going to be ransacked again. You're going to be taken into captivity. You've got to, change your ways. You've got to repent. The Messiah is coming. The Messiah is coming. The Messiah is coming. That's really where the focus was. And so in the days of the mystery of God, which was revealed to us, we become that aha moment for the angels. The mystery of God is revealed in his church, that everything he had in his plan always led up to the church. So if the mystery of God is revealed in the church, then when the mystery of God is being revealed to and is accomplished, he's talking about in the days of the establishment of the church, this is when all of this is going to take place. So again, it just keeps reiterating over and over the timeline that we have here. These things are happening soon. And now, before the seventh one even blasts its trumpet, the angel holds his arm up and says, I swear by heaven, there's no more delay. It's about to come. It's about to happen there. So I went to the angel and asked him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, take it and eat it. It will turn your stomach sour, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey. And so I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. I just try to picture this. There's a little bit of humor involved, and I think what John's kind of experiencing, he takes it, and so I just eat this? It's kind of a weird incident of what happens, but he's taking in that message. And so he takes it in there. And initially, it sounds good, right? Sweet to the mouth. But then it turns your stomach sour. Because I don't think we like to watch the destruction that's going to happen. If you were in the Roman Empire, let's put it into modern terms, but don't interpret it this way, but just put it into modern way of thinking. If the United States as a government was adamantly persecuting us to the point where we were all going to be picked off one after another and murdered and burned and every kind of thing, the message of, hey, the U.S. government's going to be taken down would be an encouragement at that point. But watching it happen, it's going to turn your stomach sour. I think that's what you see happening with this. I think what he's explaining to you is this message that it's about to happen, that it's going to happen, there's encouragement in it, but it's also sickening at the same time that it has to come to this. But it has to come to this. So when I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. Then I was told, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. And that's where we're going to wrap up. That was chapter 10. Okay, so when we get into the next one, a couple things kind of coming out. We're going to start to get into eventually the seventh trumpet. We'll finally get the seventh trumpet sounding, and that's when we start to see the beast and the dragon and all these other things. But I will remind you every single time, over and over and over again, the timeline, because we are not yet to current time. There will be a time where you'll see this really big jump in time. Hint, it'll be 1,000 years. But there's a long period of time that's still out ahead of these events. Big, huge chunk of time. And we'll see where that fits in. And then you'll see kind of where we're living, and then we match it up with other scripture, and it all kind of fits in quite a bit. Any thoughts on these chapters? Yeah.
Matt, in the Russian Bible, wormwood is called Chernobyl.
Is that
That really messes people up.
So that is actually the name of it originally, before the even Chernobyl disaster took place?
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. So for them, does that completely steer them into thinking that,
For some it did. That Gorbachev was the bad guy and the Soviet Union was going to collapse, and it did in, 5 years.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So but again, what's come up since then? Does any of the rest of these things fit? No, but I can see how that could totally throw people for a loop. And the same way that we've had, like I mentioned, when we get into the crown or the horns and the 10 horns and the little horn that's like the first, all that. I mean, there's a lot of times you can find a 10th leader who kind of matches up with the first leader. If you slide it down the timeline, it's like, oh, look, those match up. That guy was terrible, and 10 before him, that guy was terrible. And you could put that into a lot of different timelines. I mean, you could do that in the Jewish kings, honestly. That guy was terrible. That guy was terrible. That guy. And so chances are you're going to hit a couple of them that were that way. But yeah, always good to keep coming back to who was this written to. What is the intention of this? What is the really true critical passage or kind of when you look at anything, what is the one theme behind all of this? And I think it comes back to those souls under the altar. How long until our blood is avenged? That was why all of these things were happening. And that is why everything is going to happen to their oppressors and persecutors, was because he has multitudes of souls under the altar crying out to him, how much longer? And all of these are answers to, first of all, they will go down, and here's the timeline, kind of. Like as much as he can reveal to you the timeline. Soon, about to happen, there's no more delay, all of these kinds of things. And those are the words that you kind of see in that. All right. Again, kind of bad timing. Just to be in complete openness, because I also have to go down and see Logan one Sunday later in October. I'm only going to miss 3 Sundays, and they're all in October. So this is going to be a little rough patch to get through on this part of it, but we'll keep kind of reviewing so that we kind of pick it up. But we'll continue on, and we will finish the book eventually. But there will be delay on that one, so that one.